Well, thanks for coming out on this lovely spring evening. And I won't bore you with my story, but I was in trouble, as most Americans find themselves now, half a century ago. I couldn't walk, I was so obese, and smoked cigarettes and dope every day. 3 packs of cigarettes, and I don't know how I got through school, I don't know how I drove cars or any of that. And then had an awakening, not because I became conscious, because I became frightened. And sometimes fear governs consciousness. As a matter of fact, I think everyone that comes to Hippocrates, although half the people that come to us are incredibly healthy, they just want to remain healthy and live a long time, the impetus is fear. And we're going to speak about that, but they wanted me to focus tonight on new technologies, which we'll get to. But I want you to understand anatomy, even if you're a doctor, in a way that basically you may not have looked at it before. And the human body and its spectacular intricacies and how it works is just beyond comprehension. You know, there was a good period of time in my life studying science that I became an absolute card-carrying atheist. And then I started to study anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, immunity, and genetics. And I said, wow, maybe there's not a God with a beard with a particular name, but there's something's going on here. And we're going to talk about the skin. All of you are like pornography kings and queens. So you know that. You're exposing your largest organ to everyone every day. Did you know that? Now, some of you, especially when it gets nippy here, you cover it up. At least we see your head and your things. Now, the kids really, they like to expose their largest organ more than they have. They show their bellies now, and all of this. But this skin is an amazing thing. Now think about what the skin is there for. Anyone know why that evolved? Well, think about it. It evolved to hold your package together, so all of the blood and organs stay in there, because if you just took the skin away, they'd all flop on the floor. Your bones would crumble, no problem. It's also protecting you. So we have other defenses that are not as specific, like the skin, a waterproof barrier. So we have to give it a name. It's a waterproof barrier that can prevent the entry of viruses, bacteria, parasites, and chemicals. The respiratory tract, the lining of our nose, and the lining of the intestines can block entry. Now, think about this. How many of you have ever had a head cold, or you get colds in your throat, that type of thing? That's because the tissue, the skin in that area, is not working as well as it should. Isn't that amazing? Because if it was really working as well as it should, if it were working at maximum levels, it would have enough healthy bacteria to prevent a cold from ever entering into your body. So 2/3 of our body are bacteria. So when I'm actually looking at you, I'm looking at bacteria. Some is very attractive bacteria. Some, amens, not so attractive. But the reality, quite simple, is most of it's bad or bacteria that's out of balance. Now, we all know about pre- and probiotics because, as you said, marketers are great. Even Johnson & Johnson makes probiotics today. But do they really work, and what is this about? And where does all of this come from? So let's explain your number one way to keep the bacteria in your skin, the largest organ, in such a maximum level that it doesn't allow bad things to come in, including chemicals. And we'll get to that in a minute. The big story here, quite simply, is that if you're not having cellulose at very, very large amounts every single day in your gastrointestinal tract, you do not have enough food to feed pre- and probacteria. So all probiotics eat what? Cellulose. That's their innate, natural food. Now, what if you do what I used to do? I never ate a vegetable in my life. And what I had is rotting muscle, rotting intestinal tracts of other creatures. Now, do you think that if you took a piece of meat, yes, of course, here it would be organic meat, and you put it in your kitchen, and you didn't put it in the refrigerator, and it was there for 4 or 5 days, how many of you would like to go into your kitchen at that point? Raise your hand. Now, why would you not like to go into your kitchen? Because atmospheric bacteria would actually be decomposing that. Can you imagine what happens in your intestinal tract when this hits? So now, why we don't have the defenses that our great-grandparents did and great-great-grandparents did is because we're not taking the cellulose in the way and the ratio, and even if we are, most people are not eating organic cellulose. It's weakened cellulose. So skin number one. Let's get to some other interesting things. When we look at medical blood tests, we actually look at medical blood tests, the microscopic cells, and we look at the way the immune system functions. Now, one of the games my wife and I played, we used to have offices adjoining one another, and when guests come back, we know about 80% of our guests return, and some of them heal catastrophic disease and come back for holidays yearly. And when we know those people, and we know we're not going to give them a heart attack, she would be looking at their blood with a microscope, and I'd scream and come into the door at the top of my lungs, and we'd immediately redo the microscopic testing of the blood. And the blood always congregated in the corner, just like if a monster came into a room, what we would do here. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. And it happened, we tested this 168 times, and 168 times it worked. Wow. So think about that. So every little cell, and how many cells do you have? This is a test. Don't say trillion. How many trillion? 100 trillion. Give her a carrot. We have 100 trillion cells. It's shocking. And everyone has a mind of its own. Now, one of my other loves is theology, and Jewish theology talked about that, by the way. They said every cell is an independent universe, and the body is a total universe that connects to, now we'll talk about in the 21st century, the multiple universes. So that's it. Now, when you look at a blood test, you go to a doctor, they like to make it like it's a big deal. I could teach any of you here in 5 minutes how to interpret a blood test. It's super easy stuff. And pretty much, the most important part of a blood test is called the CBC. That's the CDC. That's a government organization. And we look at the white blood cells. Anyone know what that is? That's the army that literally protects you from bad things. Now, up until very recently meaning the mid-19th century, when they created something that really destroyed the earth and you, called the Industrial Revolution, the only thing that literally your poor body had to deal with is microbes. So minimal amounts of bacteria, minimal amounts of viruses, parasites, but minimal amounts. Because remember, 100 years ago we had 1 billion people on the earth. Today we have 8 billion people on the earth. And we anticipate by the middle of the century we're going to have 15 billion people on earth. Now, the problem with us is that we use products, and that we also poop, and we also urinate. And that has to go into this same planet. We don't have more space. Nobody went and negotiated with God and said, hey, we have a whole lot more people, can you give us double the room? You know, nobody's done that. So the same air, the same water that has been here for endless times, hundreds and hundreds of millions of years, now we're starting to display insanity by putting poisons and pollutants into that. And because of that, we've created an abnormal ecosystem on the earth, but a totally abnormal ecosystem within the human body. And so the white blood cell is trying to take care of thousands and thousands and thousands of times more than it's capable of doing. There was no such thing called heavy metal poisoning. There was no such thing called chemical poisoning. This is all new phenomena that, by the way, are increasing by the day. Many of you are sitting here supposedly totally conscious. I mean, come on, you're from Santa Cruz. Wearing polyester underwear. And we're going to have a test at the end of this tonight. You're going to drop your drawers, and if you have polyester underwear, you're going to go into the underwear jail. Matter of fact, I was down next to they don't call it the Leaf anymore. What's the health store?
Roots.
Oh, it's
Wild Roots.
Oh, it goes from Leafs to Roots. Yeah. What's the next one? It'll be the Dirt store. But I went right next to her and I got underwear. Now, you know, how many of you realize that polyester bras and polyester underwear are spewing deadly chemicals into your bloodstream every single minute. I wrote a book on that with my wife about 20 years ago called Killer Clothes. And we were stunned at the shocking amount of worldwide evidence of how everyone seems to know this in the scientific community. The average garment that's not cotton or natural fiber, they require 8,000 chemicals to make it. Let me repeat what I just said. 8,000 chemicals. And we're all so liberal, I know I am, at least I think I am, but I'm part of bullshitter like you are too. And what we basically are doing is we have slave labor in third world countries to make Gap shirts for $8. So we all like $8 Gap shirts, don't we? Because they're natural fiber, but they're slave labor. And when we studied the mortality rates in these villages where they have slave laborers working for these multinational companies, people were commonly dying in their 30s and 40s because of all the toxic waste that were going into their systems. So this is a relatively healthy blood test, but what we're seeing now are some statistics that you better jot in your head, because some of us are a little older here, but you start thinking about your children and grandchildren. Number one, we anticipate by the year 2075, 1/2 the worldwide population in the developed world will have kidney disorder. Want me to repeat what I just said? 50% of people on Earth in the developed world will have kidney disorder. COPD. We didn't even know what that was 10 years ago, did you? Lung disorders. 2050, 50% of people will have some kind of a lung disorder, mostly COPD. Now, these are real numbers, by the way. These aren't my imagination. And when you start to look at the data and statistics on these things, the most frightening of all is autism. How many of you know that statistic? Because we don't have to wait till 2050. That's 2025. Get your fingers, count. 6.5 years from now. So in 2025, 50% of the children born in Europe and North America will be born with some level of autism. Challenge anything I say. So you talk about violence. Sure, there's physical violence, emotional violence, racism, sexism, and then there's bodily violence that, by the way, you may be nonviolent, but you're a violent person if you're not living with impeccable integrity. You are hurting yourself. Just like where I see people consume larger amounts of meat, there's larger amounts of rape and murder. How about people that think they're conscious, think they're liberal, think we're open, and still are putting toxic waste into our systems? You are changing your hormones, and when you change your hormones, you change your consciousness. You change your attitudes, you change your capacity, and you also change your intellect. You look at this, this is really minerals. This is an exceptionally good blood test. About 80% of the people I look at have a mineral deficiency. Now, why is that? Because in the last century, 100 years in North America, 96% of our topsoil has been eroded. And back in the old days, when Washington at least acted like they were interested in the environment, today they don't even act like that. This guy Pruitt is, if you took all of the 320 million Americans and picked the worst man they could have put in head of the environment, it would have been this Pruitt guy. Yeah. Who runs the debunked EPA. Debunked. But when you look at this, you start to realize why we have autism going like that, why we have lung problems, why we have kidney problems, why we have mental illness. Oh yes, mental illness. Because if you throw your hormones off, by the way, the brain stops functioning. And we also now go back to where we started, where 2/3 of your body happen to be bacteria, but 70% of your immune system comes from your intestinal tract. Think of that. So you cannot fight disease, and furthermore, 80% of your serotonin, how many of you know what serotonin is? Comes from your intestinal tract. It's happy juice. One thing we can say factually, is 100% of everyone who has any level of depression has low serotonin. So I'll repeat what I just said. So everyone you know, including yourself, that's ever been even a little depressed, you have inadequate serotonin release coming from your intestinal tract. But sadly, if you come to Stanford and become a medical doctor today, they're going to tell you serotonin is created in the brain. One of the best universities for medicine on the planet Earth, they're going to tell you the wrong thing. Pretty interesting, isn't it? So no wonder we're confused with these things. But look at this. They made a big deal about cholesterols. Now, how do you think most people get cholesterol? They make it. Exactly right. They make it. And so, in fact, yes, eating animals that have cholesterol are going to give you high cholesterol, but the biggest culprit is you in creating cholesterol, and the biggest ingredient that makes your body create cholesterol is called sugar. And every one of you sitting here is a sugar addict. You may be partaking, or as me, not partaking, but I'm a sugar addict. I just choose not to do it anymore. Now, when I wrote my book on sugar, Sweet Disease, where every single chapter, by the way, looked at the latest data and research on how sugar feeds or creates that disease, I was talking about a Princeton study that was mind-boggling to me. They looked at full-blast heroin addicts, their brains with MRIs, full-blast cocaine addicts, and then the rest of us, sugar addicts. What was more addictive? More stunning was December 14th last year. The latest study came out, and now they've clearly captured that all forms of sugar, every form, including fruit sugar, is 20 times more addictive to the human body than cocaine. So now you know why you have a problem. Now you know why you have a problem. So I don't know if any of you ever took cocaine. I never did, thank God, because whatever I did too much of. I would have been dead, if I took cocaine at one point. But this person, by the way, is 100% healthy, but they're eating massive amounts of what? Sugar. They haven't eaten animals, by the way. This individual hadn't eaten animals in 48 years. 1 year more than me. When reviewing a medical blood test, one must adjust the normal readings to what current research has established. Now, how many of you know that blood tests are averages, not norms? Yeah. So, and well before any of us were born here, they got together with mathematicians and they put when we look at different areas of the blood, what is the average with this one? So some of you may come in with lower numbers chronically for 25, 30, 50 years and higher numbers, but for you it's okay. But sadly, doctors aren't trained to say that. Doctors basically look at that, and they're so used to looking for problems, because that's the doctor's job. They become Sherlock Holmes, that then they frighten you and say. So I've seen people who have chronically had high or low numbers. There was one guy, wonderful man, this funny story. He became incredibly well off because he owned at one moment every single McDonald's restaurant in Canada. So if you went to any McDonald's, there were lots of restaurants, he owned them, Ted. And Ted's wife was one of us. And she dragged Ted down, and he became an instant convert, and he was as strict as you could get. And this guy had an unbelievable blood test, but his cholesterol would never go below 300. So I kept calling for 2 or 3 years his wife and said, is he sneaking things at night? No, he's not sneaking things. And finally, I had to learn that one the hard way, because a friend of mine, matter of fact, he was my medical mentor, Dr. Peer, who graduated Harvard in 1928, said to me, don't you realize that some people are born with very small veins? And so in his particular case, he eats like you, but the truth of the matter is, his veins are reflecting much higher cholesterol numbers on this one. But what happens if you have high cholesterol, no matter how you get it? Where does all heavy metal and chemical like to live? It's anaerobic, in fats. Interesting. So the bigger we are, the more weight we have, the more heavy metals, the more chemicals we're going to have, because it's anaerobic. It does not like, isn't it interesting? Now these don't have brains. Remember, these are elements. Remember the periodic table. They don't have brains like the cell. They don't think on their own. But somehow they gravitate towards areas that have no stimuli, no oxygen. When meat was tested, at our top place here in the United States, the Arizona Center, they found that 47% of meat was contaminated with staph infection. So they looked over a several month period at meat that was distributed all through the country. And by the way, so that you think organic is less, organic is probably more. Because they don't pump it with steroids. They don't pump it with antibiotics. And so bacteria will grow at a much greater rate, staph will grow at a much greater rate in a biological environment than it would. Isn't that interesting? So you're getting more than that on that one. 52% of the infections were resistant to antibiotics. Now, in my latest book, Poison Poultry, I talk about antibiotic resistance. Pretty scary shit. And I'll give you a story. We had a 6-year-old girl come into my office with her grandmom and mom, and they were crying uncontrollably. We've gone to 5 doctors. All of the doctors said she doesn't have cancer, but she's vaginally bleeding. We know she has cancer because her grandmom died the same way of cancer. And finally, I had a friend of mine look at her and basically said, this girl doesn't have cancer, she has menstruation. 6 years old. So when we sat the family down, and this is uncommon, but it's not uncommon now for girls 8 and 9 having menstruation. Matter of fact, it went from my generation, 14, 15, to now 10. Think of this. And then the mom finally, when she settled down and realized she didn't have cancer, basically said, oh, the little girl, all she wants to eat is chicken McNuggets. You know, where are parenting skills? I mean, I don't know. In my house, my children ate what we ate. And by the way, they love what we eat because that's what we made them eat. That's it. I loved what my parents made me eat too. That's where I became what? A sugar addict, a meat addict, a cheese addict, a chicken addict, whatever else the addiction is. The number of people who say they don't exercise has risen from 37% to 43%. You know what percentage of people do not exercise? Adequately? Take a wild guess. Adequately is a key word. 95. 95% of the population do not do the prerequisite of exercise, which, by the way, is the least expensive and most effective way to detoxify the body. Let me repeat. Yes, I go to a sauna every day. Tomorrow I'll wake up before I get on a plane, go to Palm Springs to speak tomorrow night. I will be in a sauna. But exercise is the number one natural, always has been, way to detoxify the body. If your heart's not pounding, your blood's not pumping, and you're not sweating like a pig, you're not going to detoxify nearly as well as you should. So now, we know that less than 5% of the people exercise 5 days a week for 35 minutes aerobically. These are the minimal. You may want to write these down to see how bad you are, see what level you are. So if you don't have the heart pounding and you're sweating and not liking what you're doing, a minimum, we're not happy about this, a minimum of 35 minutes 5 days a week, you're not getting enough aerobic. Once you get, and there's nobody in here who's a kid, all of our ages, you better be stretching daily. This I fudge. I stretch 4 days, 3 days a week, but I don't stretch daily. And I can tell you, you get repetitive motion. You get older, your body and your muscles get repetitive motion no matter what. So stretching's paramount. Should be 7 days a week. You don't want a belly? You have to do what 7 days a week also? The only exercise you do 7 days a week is stretching and abdominal exercise. I do 800 sit-ups, and I still have a belly. Remember, I weighed 120 pounds more than I do now, a day. And if you don't do that, can you imagine how the belly would be? Like this. And if you're not lifting weight an hour and a half, 3 days a week, you're not doing adequate amount of exercise. You say, oh, well, I do yoga. Yoga is not lifting weight, unless you're a serious Hatha yoga advocate. Hatha yoga is the only one that resembles a bit like lifting weight. The rest is not lifting weight. Walking is not lifting weight. And if you don't lift weight, number one, you're going to look like hell. Every single person you think looks sexy lifts weights. How many of you know that? Everyone. When I go to the gym in LA, I'm there at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, all the actors, all the actresses, all the hosts on TV shows, in New York the same thing, they're there I leave after 3 hours and they're there another hour, 2, 3 hours. So if you're not doing an hour and a half, 3 days a week of weightlifting, 5 days a week, 35 minutes of aerobic, and also stretching daily, and if you're not skinny, as I'm not, you better do a lot of 7 days a week what? Sit up. Now, the number one way to detox, and guess what? None of that costs a penny. It costs time. It costs commitment. It costs consciousness. You have to be conscious, committed, and then you're going to do well with these things. So let's keep going through these things. Basic inflammation increases blood flow with swelling for edema, heat, and pain. Now, doctors finally started to speak 20 years ago, the more enlightened ones, and said, inflammation creates disease. They're wrong. Here's what the statement should be. Bad lifestyle creates inflammation. Inflammation, bad lifestyle, inflammation is a symptomology of that, which, by the way, is synonymous with disease. That's the real story. Inflammation in and of itself doesn't create disease. It's a bad lifestyle creates inflammation. Now, one thing we know is the newest, greatest technologies we've had at Hippocrates lately, and you know about the beamer. Now there's one that's 10 times better than the beamer, called QRS. This makes microcirculation work. You know what microcirculation is? Interesting. Even years ago, I studied anatomy and biochemistry, and I still forget this all the time. I said, blood is pumping through your veins. Wrong statement. Wrong statement. What is it pumping through? I just said it. Capillaries. Capillaries are microscopic little tiny veins you can hardly see. That's where three-quarters of the blood move through capillaries. And as we age and we're not moving around and we're not circulating and we're not stretching, those damn capillaries can't move the blood. Now, if I want to make a river filthy, dirty, and septic, I just stop the river from what? Moving. So it's no different. Think about it. If I stop your bloodstream from moving, it's going to become a big puddle of dirt and you're going to get inflammation. So we've got to really consider this whole thing. Now, infrared saunas are powerful agents against this. What we know is that an infrared sauna versus the sauna I'll take here at the fitness club tomorrow, normal Swedish saunas, is 87% more waste coming out of the body with an infrared sauna. So if you don't buy another thing in the rest of your life, buy your ass a sauna. Because I'll tell you, you don't have one of those and you're not using them, you cannot be as well as healthy. Or, by the way, when you have all this waste in your body, your brain doesn't work the way it should. Inflammation is an attempt to restore homeostasis, balance in the body. The tissue in our body perform many roles in doing so, like protection, support, filtration, absorption, secretion, movement, transportation, and defense against disease. So when cells are injured, they set off an inflammatory response process. So think about this. If you punched me in the arm, we'd immediately see what? It would swell up. And you know how beautiful that is? Think about how genius the immune system is. The immune system realizes the leukocytes, and I'm going to give you some other names. This is impressive stuff when you think about it. White blood cells, the name of the armed services, but they have an army, and that's called eosinophils. And they have a navy, and that's called basophils. And the list goes on. And some take care of bacteria, some take care of cancer, some take care of virus, some take care of parasites and amoeba, and they all know what they should be doing. But when they come out to take away the dead tissue because you've just punched the arm, or you've had an injury of some type, the fight goes on. And the good guys are beating, with fist fighting, the bad guys up to take them away. That creates heat, and the body knows it. So you know what it does? It brings water along. So edema, so when I'm dealing with people with severe cancer, many, many times their bellies blow up. And they're all freaked out because the doctor says, drain it, drain it. That means they're getting sick. What it means to me is what's working? Their immune system's working. If that doesn't happen, then I have a prayer meeting in the back room at that point. That's when I'm really worried about it. So if the body is functioning because the immune system knows we can't be fighting without killing healthy cells, so I'm going to bring water along. Edema is a good thing. So drinking water is a problem in this country as well as in Europe. 6 out of 10 of us are dehydrated chronically. So 60% of the population is dehydrated chronically. The number one way to detoxify is exercise. Equal to exercise is consumption of pure fluid. Now, pure water is easy. Now, I know a lot of you have been marketed into believing there's all these wonderful waters out there that are magical and stuff. I saw, of course, we're in California, magic water today, $5.60. What the fuck's magic water? I don't know. But the reality is, if you're not drinking distilled water, you're getting polluted. Listen closely to me. And you're going to challenge me and say, oh, well, that's not what Dr. Schmuck said. Well, his name's Dr. Schmuck. You're going to listen to him? Dr. Schmuck doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a schmuck. If you're not drinking distilled water or something equivalent, if you're very wealthy, you can make something equivalent to it, but it costs thousands of dollars. You are drinking plastics. You are drinking heavy metals. You are drinking pharmaceutical drugs. Let me repeat, pharmaceutical drugs. Because every drop of water on the planet Earth has all of those things in it. And you, by the way, here, Fukushima is still leaking coming over here. Yeah. Now, you're not quite as bad as the Pacific Northwest. But you're right on the rim here. You're on the rim. And so, it's insane if you say, oh, I'm a vegan, and I eat organic food, and I eat raw food, but by the way, I drink spring water. You're nuts. Because spring water is loaded with what we talked about. Now, I knew about this, but when I was interviewing 3 of the world's leading marine biologists, oceanographic scientists, they confirmed it to me. There's 7 alive today. I interviewed 3 for my book, Killer Fish. And it shocked me. They said the North Pole and South Pole has this stuff in it. So you don't get heavy metals from eating lead. You get it from eating fish. You get it from drinking bad water. You get it from wearing polyester clothes. 8,000 chemicals to make a garment. I'm a hip guy like the rest of you, so I bought a Tesla. Even inside the Tesla, I'm being polluted when I'm driving. It's all plastic. So I hang my head out the window of the new Tesla, right? Not yet. But when they do, I'll get it. I'll have, things sit up and my head out the top. So, white blood cells like neutrophils and monocytes will destroy the microbes. This is to destroy and neutralize toxic agents and to stop them from spreading. Healing processes of all type place a great demand on the body's storage of nutrients that are used during the white blood cell attack. Now, what did I just say there? So the more toxic you are, the more nutrition you need. And why do you think most people don't have, you know what the percentage is? 92% of the public lack 1 or more vital nutrients. So that means only 8% of the public have all the nutrients they need. Now, this isn't something I read, this is something I've seen in my 47 years of work. So I do elaborate blood tests. I'm like shocked when somebody doesn't lack a nutrient. And if you're toxic and have heavy metals and you're overweight, where heavy metals like to be, etc., you're going to have more need for nutrition because the body can't absorb nutrition when you're toxic like that, and you have less nutrition. So, Linus Pauling, he lived close to here. Any of you know Linus Pauling? Pretty smart guy. He was one of those nice guys, He's like really a weird guy. He was super smart, but you could talk to him. Yeah, right. Yeah, most guys like him you couldn't talk to, Oh, they're out, well, they're too smart, don't talk to them, they'd say. And Linus Pauling said in 1968, I remember it well, that every single disease has a nutritional deficiency component. And guess what? Hippocrates Health Institute, since 1956, has proven that. Because what they said isn't a sales pitch, that why I do this work, and I'll never stop doing this work, is because I watch people come back from the dead on a daily basis. Last night, I'm in Oregon, in Portland, and I had to wait 30 minutes before I could speak because there was one testimony after another testimony. The people that hosted me, by the way, the woman came to me 30 years ago from Chicago. She had chronic fatigue syndrome, laying in bed. Doctors didn't know what they could do to her. Comes to us. Her friend got her to us because they said, this is an upscale spa. Was she shocked? And I said, when did you figure out? I said it in front of the group lesson. When did you figure out we were in a spa? She said, the day they brought the enema bag out. She said, I really knew it wasn't a spa when you told us to put grass up our ass too. This is a true story, by the way. Okay. Her husband, 5 years ago, ends up with CLL. You know what that is? As far as medicine's concerned, an incurable cancer. Well, we'll prolong your life, we'll do palliative care. Comes and heals cancer. Okay. Heals cancer. Okay. Girl with colitis. Goes to something like 18 doctors. She's telling the story last night. I said, after 6, you should have given up. I said, you must have a lot of money. She said, no. She said, I almost mortgaged my house to go to the doctor. 18 doctors said to her, after they looked at what she was doing, you have colitis and it's incurable. You can never cure colitis. By the way, how many of you know that 75% of all diseases, doctors will tell you are incurable, but they're willing to treat you for it? It's like crazy. Diabetic type 2, incurable. Shit, I've never seen a diabetic type 2 not get better. If you don't get better, you're not on the diet, period. They all get better. Heart disease, chronic. Did your mother have it? Did your father have it? Did the aunt have it? Did your cousin have it? Did the neighbor have it? Did the dog have it? You're going to have it. 97% is completely reversible. Just have to change 2 things, your head and your diet. That's it. Your head and your diet. 100%. And by the way, brain cancer, liver cancer, all of this stuff is reversible. You say, well, if that's true, why don't they tell us? Because Dr. Schmuck is running Stanford University. Dr. Schmuck's in the pocket of the schmucks who are running the world. We Americans, we love America. How many of you love America? Raise your hand. Not the present America. That's becoming great again. But the old America, that was great. You know, where's this great again? What's this great again bullshit? That's a way to look down at people. Before we had the black guy, it was really nice. That's what they really mean by that. You told me a story tonight, I completely freaked out. Now they can't get people against Native Americans because we feel so guilty about that. And so now they're saying that they're jihadists.
Islamic jihad.
Can you imagine this stuff? So now the bad word is, when I was a boy, my grandfather used to say the bad word was, they would call us what? Harps. I'm Irish, so harps. Then my Italian friends, they used to call them wops or guineas, right? And the word nigger. Well, what's the difference? Now the new word for all of that bullshit is jihads. Jihads. And they're all over the place, you know.
In the mattress.
In the mattress. Oh yeah, we're looking. Let me tell you, the whole thing's a big racket. So now we're going to go to abscess. How many of you ever had an abscess here? Thank God your body was functioning. If you didn't have an abscess, you'd die of septic poisoning. Isn't that amazing? Your body would actually die of poisoning. So an abscess is an excessive accumulation of pus that somehow was not eliminated, like pimples and boils. So the body just said, you have too much of this garbage in you, I'm going to make a big, big, ugly thing like that. And they're sort of beautiful. Many of us may say, hey, they're pretty attractive. You know, you could save on jewelry. Imagine you could put them on your ears. The kids would like them rather than put the spikes through there, and they could put them in their nose. Maybe they can bring 3 or 4 down here that way. The belly button things, we can put them right out there. Giant abscess. The overproduction of digestive acid may cause an ulcer in the stomach. Poor circulation in the legs could result in ulcers where tissues are damaged, a storage of oxygen and nutrients. Now think of this. How many of you, let's be really honest, don't try to act like you're all health people here. How many of you realize you're getting older and you're not walking as well as you used to walk? That's not normal. That's not normal. That's because you're toxic. Where I really learned that, you know, I always talk my way into doing things, and they said, well, we need a nutritional guy, and they were going down to an expedition to see a tribe that commonly lived above a century. And I talked my way. I said, oh, I'll look at their nutrition and I'll write about that. I came out and I was stunned, you know. This tribe was just remarkable. I wanted to go move there. It was just too hard for me to learn languages, so I said, no, I better not do it. And the equality there was just phenomenal. The men and women were respectful. When a child would speak, when they just started to speak, they could say 10 words. Everyone would stop and listen to the child. They laughed. I never heard so much laughter in my life. It was like going to a Woody Allen movie or something. 24 hours a day. It was just funny, 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 the whole thing. And I came out and I said, I'm going to have a hard time. Sure, they eat this plant-based diet, but that's not why they're 100 years old. They're having a shitload of fun. They don't want to die, We went to one and they had a totally round building, and I didn't hear or understand a word that they said. I heard it, but I didn't understand it. And the oldest person spoke, then the next oldest, and the woman and the man, it doesn't matter. And I left early, but one of my colleagues stayed and said, the youngest child was the last one that spoke, and it was dead silent. It was like after a snowstorm in the mountains. You know how beautiful that is? Just calm. And so genuine and so authentic and so humane and so real and so much something that I wish we had in us at this point. And so the body basically wants that sense of homeostasis and balance, and if it doesn't have it, it makes pretty things on you like this. It says, well, shit, this one's a goofball. Heavy metals are invisible particles that saturate our entire environment. Air, water, food, clothing, residence, and workplaces are generally contaminated with these disease-causing microscopic pieces that enter our body and play havoc on our health. Now, to avoid this today is almost impossible. Now, I don't want to get talking about what we all know. In Santa Cruz, I can say this, and nobody's going to raise their eyebrow. They're seeding the atmosphere now with heavy metals. But, it's worse than that. I mean, when I was a kid growing up in the New York area, they thought I was cute because I could identify the factory odor in the air. That's not a joke, by the way. I was like 5 years old. They said, oh, isn't that cute? Brian just identified that's a DuPont factory in Newark. My parents are wonderful people, but it's totally unconscious. They thought it was cute that the air smelled like that. I remember being in New York City. My eyes would be red every time because lead. Nobody ever thought about that. Lead and this stuff just doesn't pop out of your body. It doesn't come out. And how many of you know that now the next phase of clothing, they're going to actually weave metal into the clothing? So you don't have to wash it, so the odors, people's body odor is becoming so foul now. Listen to me and challenge anything I say. Becoming so foul, they're going to actually weave metals into it, particulate metals into it, so that it won't smell. And how many of you remember the 70s? I was never much into the 70s. I'm a 60. I never changed from the 60s. I'm still in 1968 somehow. I was really happy in 1968. What the hell happened since then? The 90s, I had hope. Shit, the kids were playing music that were good. Then, shit, it came back again. But the reality, quite simply, is in the 70s, those discotheques, my God, they smelled like whorehouses. Why? Because everyone wore what? So why did it smell like that? Anyone know? Their bodies could not what? Breathe. Planet Earth is further contaminated with the 2,000 newly created chemicals each year that together with other man-made chemicals manifest tens of thousands more. Now think of what I say. Every year, right here in California, this is one of the heyday places. Remember, you now have the 6th strongest economy in the world. How many of you know that? You went from 7 to 6. So most countries in the world don't have an economy as good as California. The overwhelming mass majority. No. So you're creating a lot of chemistry here. And when I was a kid, I went to the World's Fair in 1960. Remember that? What was the big theme? Chemistry is going to change the world. You have it. Boy, it has changed the world, okay. Now, 57% of us will have cancer in our life. That's one way it's changed. So, some chemist somewhere is going to create a chemical that never existed, and nobody's going to monitor it. It used to be that I'd yell about China's EPA. China has what? 1,300,000,000 people. They have 75 people that work for their EPA. They're probably better than we are with this asshole Pewitt running the EPA at this point. This guy's an anti-environmentalist. I've never seen anyone as against the environment. He put somebody in charge, by the way, who's anti-education, who's running the education department. And what is this buffoon he has from Texas, the former governor? He didn't even know that part of his job in the energy department is to look over the nuclear waste. He said, oh, I didn't know that was my job. That was like 6 months into the job. They should have kept him on Dancing with the Stars. He was pretty good with that. Mercury is the most deadly of all toxic metals. It accumulates in our brain, heart, kidneys, and endocrine system. Pretty smart stuff. Brain. This can result in memory loss, anemia, heart and liver concerns, and it can melt myelin sheaths in the nerves. So a lot of people, you notice a lot of people are like this today? How much mercury do you think we have? Now, I'm not going to make you raise your hand, but most of you here, you eat fish because fish is good for omega oil. It's good for omega oil, right? It's horribly bad for omega oil. By the way, did you ever see the largest study ever done on cardiovascular disease in fish and fish oil? Done by a small little country called Finland. They looked at hundreds of thousands of people who were eating fish and taking fish oil. And by the way, they had double the heart attacks. Double the heart attacks. And by the way, where does the fish get the omega oil? From something called an algae. Where does a cow get the protein? From something called the grass. Now, I know a lot of us are arrogant enough because we're biblical. We rule the world, all other creatures are subservient to us, but the truth of the matter is, that's stupidity. And go right to the source. And if you're eating the flesh of an animal that, by the way, lives on the filthy, dirty planet that you live on and reside in, and you're putting it into your body, do you think that's not toxic overload that's happening at this point? In my book, Poison Poultry, I point out that there's not one employee for the U.S. government that monitors eggs or poultry. Not one. There's not an employee. There's no such thing as organic. Who regulates the so-called free-range industry? The industry. Next time I come back, I'll do that. Maybe we should do a day conference here where I'll show you 8 hours.
That'd be great.
I actually have photographs of the so-called free-range. They're exactly at the same factory farm, same exact factory farm where every other factory farm is. The difference is the industry says if we open the window up for a minimum of 30 minutes a day, we can call it free range. How many of you saw the study that was done on over 1 million eggs? Several hundred thousand, 1 million, several hundred thousand eggs. They looked at 68 countries, and they actually found that 90% of the eggs, half of which were so-called organic eggs, had salmonella or E. coli, or both salmonella or E. coli. And you don't even have to cook it. You just touch it and you get that. Wake up, people. Wake up. It's all the same. Same bullshit. Remember, if I pull shit out of your ass, that's what you're doing with a chicken, I'd probably find E. coli and salmonella. Yeah. This is an embryo of a chicken. This is an unborn little chicken, by the way. And it's coming out of the same place that poop comes out of. So think about this. Don't be irrational and go along with the program. A lot of we liberals think we have it down. We don't. We got to challenge our own liberalism. We've got to realize that we're full of shit too. We're just less full of shit. The silver filling. This is like bizarre craziness. Now, when I was a little boy, my grandmother, when I would walk into a room where there was a thermometer, she would freak out. How many of you remember that? I didn't even go near I didn't know what a thermometer was. Don't go near the thermometer. Because in her generation, from the late 19th century, early 20th century, they thought of mercury like you and I do nuclear waste. Now, in the heyday of this, everyone freaked out about mercury. Because one thing they knew, if people touched mercury, they died. They put fillings into the mouth. Listen to this. A silver filling is 50% mercury, and the EPA found that one filling is enough to close a 10-acre lake. I'm not kidding. One filling. You know how many fillings I had in my mouth? 18. I looked like a rapper before there were rappers. I opened my mouth in Florida, that's people put sunglasses on. Oh shit. Tell him to shut his mouth. Mercury fillings started in the 1800s when Grandma was alive, and they said, oh my God, don't go near the thermometer. You're going to end up with poison. Mercury in German is called quacksilver. Now, dentistry or dentists, I should say, that take it out are called quacks. Isn't it interesting? So you take it out, it's a reverse. You're called a quack. But listen to this. It is found in adhesives, air conditioning. The vast majority of air conditioning units have mercury in it. Keep going. Well, look at this one. Fabric softeners. 100% of fabric softeners have this in it. 100%. Floor wax. Oh, I want a shiny floor. And brain damage. Should say that brain damage on the back of it too. Cosmetics. How many of you ever read Dr. Epstein's book, Toxic Beauty? Dr. Epstein, he's an American. He's the most important toxicologist alive today. How I knew about it is a friend of mine who lives here in Northern California, who edited some of my books for me, called me and said, I want you to read this book before it comes out. I called him up on Monday. I said, you've exaggerated this. He said, no. He said, what do you think? And I said, I think there's an international campaign to kill women. Now, I don't say anything lightly. I used to be naive enough to think if you're rich, you're not going to have the same problem. They found in $2,000 an ounce perfume formaldehyde. You don't have to go to Walmart and buy this stuff. I haven't shopped in Walmart in 15, 20 years. I don't go near that place. The reality, quite simple, is it's everywhere. And if you look at the ingredients in this, they are known neuron disruption, destroy the brain, nervous system, and cancer-causing elements. And it's almost unanimously in all. The natural food store, I can walk you into most natural food store and show you that most of the cosmetics there have deadly poisons in them. The natural food store. No, some of the mineral ones today, yeah. But I mean, I'm not here to cheer you up tonight. I'm here to wake you up. A long time ago, the hat makers who used felt with mercury slowly went insane. That's where the Mad Hatters came from. Isn't that interesting? I used to use that, and I never knew it until I investigated to do this work. The Mad Hatter, because imagine when you were a parent and your little boy came to you and said, when I grow up, I'm going to be a hat maker. Well, we're going to lose that one. It's going to end up in a nut house. Think of that. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Lead is still all over the place. Lead is contained in paints, insecticides, pottery, toothpaste. Colgate has it in it. Pepsodent has it in it. All the large commercial ones all have it in it. Plastics, gasoline, batteries, newspaper. I hope you're not literal. You'll be in trouble. Canned foods, chocolate, etc. It accumulates in the brain, liver, bones, kidneys, and spleen. It can alter behavior and intelligence. And it doesn't take pounds of lead to make you dumb. It takes fractions and fractions of ounces to make us dumb. Nickel can be found in stainless steel. So everyone says, oh, I cook in stainless steel. Great, I'm going to get nickel. Pots and pans and dental fillings. It accumulates in bones, kidneys, sinuses, brains, and the immune system. Chronic nickel toxicity could lead to skin conditions. So before I learned this 20 years ago, we used to see people with rashes that were not psoriasis, were not eczema, and we couldn't figure it out. And then once I popped this into my head, we got rid of the nickel by putting people into saunas, giving them certain minerals, giving them certain supplementation, and in most cases had them exercise, it would go away. So almost, I wouldn't say 100%, but probably almost 100% were nickel toxemia. Arsenic is in cigarette. The only time I had any sympathy for Baby Bush. And isn't it amazing? Baby Bush looks like a genius compared to this idiot. We'll take Baby Bush back any day, you know. Him and Cheney, Darth Vader. Oh, yes. Right. It's like insane, beyond human comprehension how this happened. But I remember he came on about a month after they made him president. And he said, I'm reading a report here, and the report says that Americans, we lose 2,000 Americans every year to arsenic poisoning. And I just don't know what to do. That was an honest statement. What the hell are you going to do? What can you do about that? And they admit, and God knows how many it really is, 2,000 people a year die from arsenic poisoning. But look at why. It's in cigarettes. Laundry detergents. Now you can wear it along with your polyester. Add another chemical. Beer. Uh-oh. My people, no wonder they're all in trouble. Seafood, drinking water, wine. Uh-oh, you're in trouble out here now. Oh, we don't drink alcohol, we drink organic wine. What the hell do you think that shit is? Just expensive alcohol, that's all it is. Clothes and wallpaper accumulates in the liver, kidney, and lungs. Cadmium is found in soft drinks. Soft drinks. You're not going to tell me there's not an intent for some of this stuff? Pesticides, fungicides, plastics, rust-proofing, rubber, cigarette smoke, water softener, and accumulates in the kidneys, prostate, and eyes. By the way, let's go back to that because I've worked with maybe 100 people that I can actually link directly the cadmium detoxification to their eyesight improvement. And there was probably more. I was just not awake most of the time. That I could link. Uranium. You're getting tons of that stuff. Now, a lot of you get that stuff from unlikely places. How many of you use computers here? Raise your hand. How many of you use cell phones here? Raise your hand. How many of you have routers in your house? Or how many of you, I mean, even Santa Cruz has cell towers. How many? Yeah, and more coming. How many of you saw the study that was done in New York? It was actually made, a documentary was made of it, where they actually showed neighborhoods closer to the cell towers had more cancer. The further away you went, less cancer. Okay. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse at this point. And my children's generation, I have them from 40 to 20, and then I have baby grandchildren, seven of them. They don't function without cell phones. They can't function without them. And, you know, what are we going to do about these things? Because nobody's addressing it. One of my colleagues and friends, Dr. Devra, D-E-V-R-A, Davis, was Bill Clinton's top scientist for 8 years. Any of you know who Dr. Davis is? Look her up. #1 advocate against cell phones in relationship to cancers in the United States. And she's a very nice lady and a bright woman. And she basically is my age, and her husband's probably 10 years older than us, and he made her retire and dragged her out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I mean, look, that's a nice place to ski, but shit, I wouldn't want to live there. You ever been to Jackson Hole, Wyoming?
Yeah.
It's not even great skiing, to be honest with you. Shithole. Who said shithole before? Okay. And so now she's going bonkers, so she starts to reread her research. And Bill Clinton commissioned a $25 million study to see if cell phones created brain cancer. How many of you knew that? Until I met Dr. Davis, I didn't know that. He was even a nicer guy than I thought he was. Just like young girls too much, that's all. But the fact of the matter is, they come back and say, absolutely not. There's no evidence that cell phones do that. So she's reading this study a few years ago, and they didn't even try to make a segue. First half of the study said, absolutely no question it creates brain cancer. And then the next page says, no, it doesn't. So she hand-selected all of the scientists that did work. And she called, and he admitted. So they walked in. He said, who's they? And said, you'll never work again in the field of science. So who's the #1 advocate in this country against cell phones? Look up Dr. Davis. And by the way, I was one of the founding members of an organization that if you really want to hear the truth easily, because it's free, we created an organization called therealtruthabout.health.com. And we hold, if you wish, you can get on a plane and come for free 10-day conferences. We hold them yearly. I either sponsor the conferences, I'm always speaking there, but I'm not the only guy speaking. And our prerequisite is when we interview the world expert on something, if she or he backs down, we disinvite them. If they're political, if they say anything to compromise, if they have fear within them, we don't invite them. And so this year we had 32 people in the field of the environment, health, vaccines, the whole bit, world's authority, and for free you can watch this stuff. And you can get on a plane and come. Next year, I think it's going to be in January again. We held it in Florida, now it's back in New York again. Someday we bring it out to California. As the number of x-rays and CAT scans performed on people have soared. Why? Why are they doing more x-rays and CAT scans? How much money they make on these things? Do you realize a CAT scan is 1,000 times more dangerous than an x-ray? What did I just say to you? 1,000 times. And that's not a joke, by the way. You can look that up in the JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. These imaging tests are now responsible for about 50% of the radiation North Americans are exposed to. So it's Fukushima? No. You're going to get x-rays. And doctors today, because of lawyers, are not going to do anything without an x-ray. So you can't say, he treated me, she treated me incorrectly. They wanted, exactly, chiropractors. So the whole system is, it doesn't matter, you're going to end up with problems. You have to do it. Aluminium is used in water filtering. This is really a big bummer. Listen to this one. Almost all water filters do something called folication to remove dirt, which it also does to our blood, causing strokes and heart attacks. So you may have clean water, you may not get cancer, but you'll end up with a heart attack and stroke. 80% of all water filters do folication. And water filters don't work anyway, by the way. That's why you need to go to a distiller. Water filters are a joke, because those little bad guys, the plastics and pharmaceuticals, go right through those filters like it's nothing. Matter of fact, when the testing has been done on ROs, really good ROs, only 3 or 4% is collected. Almost all of it's still there, yeah. Okay. It accumulates in our bones, kidneys, and breast and causes anemia. It is found in deodorants that glue our sweat glands so toxins cannot get out. That could lead to breast cancer. Aluminium in pots, pans, and foil can cause Alzheimer's. My grandmother was so happy. Dirt poor Irish Catholic, blue collar. Salt of the earth, good person. Never would lie, never do anything. Laid for 10 years drooling, didn't know who we were. And I remember the day my grandfather was so proud. He came home from Woolworths with aluminum pan set. Gertie, we finally got the money. I remember him saying, little Dan Daly. We finally got the money, Gertie. Look at this. And it was shiny. She would shine that aluminium up. Remember that? They would shine it. She was just so proud of that set. And ate every single day, 3 times a day out of that aluminium, and ended up laying there with Alzheimer's, which, by the way, nobody doubts anymore. The alternative guys, we used to talk about that 30 years ago. Now it's in mainstream literature this day. Aluminium in pots and pans, foil, and foil. Remember leftovers? And you think a pot is going to give you aluminium. Foil is going to give it a lot more, because it's so thin when you heat it up, the molecule structure of it just dispenses very easily. Now here's the punchline, and we're going to go to another section on epigenetics. So the punchline is, I could not figure out why it was so damaging to have these heavy metals and chemicals until a colleague of mine, who's a renowned biological scientist, said to me, do you realize that minerals that are commonly lacking in people's diets appear to the body cells just like heavy metals appear to the body cells just like minerals do. So, a lot of people, most of us, lack selenium. Why? It's been out of the soil in America for over a century. And selenium is central to your thyroid, to your brain, to your immune system, to your sex organs, central to it. And it's not in soil unless you're taking a nutrient supplement. And it looks exactly like selenium, but it's really mercury. So it eats it, the cell eats it. Calcium, not as common a deficiency as you think. If you listen to television, they think everyone has. It's only 1 out of 125 women lack calcium. Not a common deficiency. But we need a lot of calcium. And it's not only for your bones, but it's also for your intestinal tract. It's also for your circulatory system. Calcium, lead looks like calcium. Cadmium looks like zinc. Zinc we need a lot of. By the way, most of your hair got white here because you didn't have enough zinc. So the 2 elements that basically, once I learned that, I've been taking shitloads of zinc since. 2 elements that make people's hair go white prematurely. All of us, if we live long enough, our hair will go white. But prematurely it goes white because you lack mostly zinc, and what's the second one? Copper. And don't want to take lots of copper, but you need little bits of copper. And copper isn't a big deficiency. Zinc is, because the body needs so much zinc. I mean, right here we go back to Linus Pauling again, this wonderful, smart, cute little guy. He was completely wrong on vitamin C. You realize that's been debunked. Vitamin C doesn't have anything to do with common colds. But what we've solidly known for 25 years now is zinc has a shitload to do with it. It's so established that, by the way, the pharmaceutical companies just put inexpensive zinc tablets into pharmaceutical prescriptions, and you're buying something for 10, 20, 30 times more than you would at the health store. And all it is zinc. Because there's a way we understand ionically that it captures the microbe and kills it. Zinc is ionic. It's an electrically charged structure. And so zinc is important. But aluminium, magnesium, boy, we need a lot of magnesium. What is magnesium central for? And why? Because it's a muscle relaxant. So nature's muscle relaxant is zinc. So all the cramps you have, and muscle relaxant, all the repetitive motion stuff often has, not only with not using it correctly, but not having enough magnesium. And I won't make you raise your hand, but there's a lot of old farts like me in here. I bet some of you get cramps in your legs. Some of you get things like that. That's magnesium, almost always. If it's not magnesium, it's something severe, which is rare. And aluminium, nickel, and uranium look like magnesium. Last thing I'll say. This pisses me off more than everything else I'm talking about tonight. 8 out of 10 common baby products contain flame retardants that could cause cancer and brain damage. Duke University. So it used to be hippie doctors in California. Now it's major institutions that are fed up. And they're starting to come out with this data. But nobody's allowed to read it. They don't put it in mainstream journals. Now, think about how incredibly insane this process is. If a flame is big enough to burn your infant grandchild or your infant child, do you think flame retardant on clothing is going to save the child? Think about this. But here I am, Mr. Health. When my babies were young, I didn't realize that they were putting it in car seats. So I thought I was being a great father, strapping my 4 kids in the car seats and driving around in the heat of Florida, which outgasses more than Santa Cruz. I didn't know that. Why? The petrochemical industry has such manipulation and control of governments worldwide. It's beyond comprehension, it really is. They pretty much do this completely 100% for profit and try to get the sympathy from the heartstrings of the public and say, of course, I want to protect my child. And from the day that flame retardant came out, from the day it came out, we knew it caused cancer and it altered brain waves. We knew that. It was not a speculative thing. So now let me come down. We're going to move to a whole nother subject, if I can do that. Here we go. All right, we got it. Thank you. Give them a big hand. That's pretty impressive. You know as much as my 2-year-old grandchild. It's unbelievable. So look at that. Sinister forces, epigenetics, not genetics. So doctors are trained in the United States to intimidate you by saying everything's genetic. Now that's pretty scary for people. Because what it really means without saying it, it's hopeless. Isn't it? It's hopeless. And up until 15 years ago, we were the queen of the ball. The world would look at the United States and the FDA and the CDC and say, we're going to follow them blindly because they're the greatest, they're the best, they have the biggest budget, they have the smartest minds. And about 15 years ago, the Europeans got fed up. And they jumped off the boat. And they started to really study the true science of today, epigenetics. And we're going to show you that and show you that epigenetics not only has to do with food, it has to do with environment, psyche, everything put together. So epigenetics dramatically and consistently tear away at the fibrine of human biological health. Among the sinister forces is the relieving discovery of glycation, whereas proteins and sugars bond together to create destructive forces that instantly affect the genes. This, of course, can be changed as rapidly as it's created. Yeah. So we used to think that to change genetics took how many generations?
Oh, it was
Endless. So again, if you go over here to Stanford, an hour away, they're going to be teaching the geneticists getting PhDs that genetics are irreputable. That literally, once you have genes that have certain patterns and pathways, that they're not going to change. We now have overwhelming evidence globally that your thoughts within less than a second can actually change genes. Your DNA changes like this, quick and rapidly. I want you to watch this. This is amazing. So this is a lifespan. And as I'm speaking about this, I want you to keep looking at it because this is from infancy through maturity. Leading nemesis like shock and its related stress have such a wide-reaching negative effect on cells, hormones, and genes. See how she's aging? It's amazing film work that they did here. And this is a common problem that all of us have. Now, if we have stress in our life, and let me show you how big of a difference it is than a century ago. We now estimate that we have 15,000 times more stress than a woman or man would have in the year 1900. The difference, quite simply, is they didn't have radios, they didn't have television, they didn't have, obviously, computers, and they were colloquial. They lived most of the time, they lived in small little communities. They knew their family, they knew some of the neighbors, and that was it. Tonight you go home, you plug on the TV, you don't have enough stress in your life, you end up with stress. And so we're aging at a much more rapid pace today than ever in history, and they're trying to lie to us and tell us that we live longer than we've ever lived. You know how they come up with that statistic? It's quite interesting. Our generation, most of us sitting here, are part of the what generation? What does that mean? Anyone know what that means? You're part of it. It means our parents had a lot of babies. So around or after the war, they had a lot of babies. So there's a lot of us, not that we're living longer. So again, in our grandparents' generation, 1/4 of all babies would die before they were 1. It was infant mortality. So if babies died at birth and people lived to 100, to make this simple for you, the average life expectancy was 50. Now modern medicine's not all that bad, and one of the good things that they did is diagnostics. Once they diagnose you, run like hell because they don't know how to treat you. They're great at diagnostics. So they wiped out, virtually, not really, but virtually wiped out infant mortality. Now it's gone up to 75 and everyone's excited about it. Now, how can we possibly be living longer when 100 years ago, and this is a fact, not an opinion, only 3% of the population contracted cancer? What did I tell you about 28 minutes ago? 57%. Lung disease was almost non-existent, only black lung disease from what? Miners. It was almost non-existent. When did I tell you? What year is it going to be half of us will have lung disease? 50. What did I tell you about kidney disorder? Which is mostly meat consumption, by the way, animal consumption. 75. And then you're going to have 50%. And so these are unreasonable things for intelligent people to believe. But again, most of you aren't doctors or scientists, and you're not sitting around challenging what you're hearing, and you're so busy making a living or taking care of your house, and so you would hope and believe that somebody is going to take care of this, and they're not. So the scary news is that we're getting older and older quicker, and here are the reasons. There was a great American that, of all places, was at the University of Nebraska in 1954. His name was Harman, H-A-R-M-A-N. And Harman said, how everyone ages and how 100% of diseases occur is called free radical damage. He was right. We haven't changed that scenario. And what a free radical is, to make it clear for you, is how many cells do we have in our body? 100 trillion. Every one of those 100 trillion cells have 2 electrons strategically placed the same distance apart that move in a clockwise manner that keeps the cell round and it keeps the cell moving. Do you follow that? When you do bad things, and let's talk about some of the bad things, not sleeping enough, being in a bad relationship, having a job you hate, which 8 out of 10 people say, by the way. 8 out of 10 people who work for a living hate what they do. It's a great way to be. You kill the cell. Eating bad food, eating chemicals, breathing chemicals, taking showers without filters in them. So now those 2 electrons that are in every one of your 100 trillion cells start to move in a counterclockwise manner. That's where, wisely, he called it a free radical. And this electric is attracted to what? Electric. And where is the electric? In healthy cells. Now, if you put too much electric in a healthy cell, what does it do to a healthy cell? Kills it. So once again, why you age prematurely and why we get every one of diseases is because of free radical damage. Now you said, Brian, just a few minutes ago, you said we get cancer because of chemicals and heavy metals. So what do the heavy metals and chemicals do? Kill the cells, create more free radicals. Interesting. How many of you have, and you won't admit it, I know, how many of you have what we used to call liver spots or age spots? I have more today than I had a year ago. And why? That's visible free radical damage. That's what you're seeing. And people say the sun caused it. No, the sun is the most impressive thing to strengthen your immune system. It's not causing anything. It's actually expressing what's going on inside of your body. So why, when you sit in the sun, you feel remarkable? It's because your immune system's kicking ass. It's pushing all the waste out, chemicals out. And so another detox, we're on number 3 now. Number 1 is exercise, almost equal is water consumption. And now we're talking about sun, number 3. Now, because you're not living in a place where it's sunny all of the time, what should you be doing 365 days a year? No, taking infrared saunas. Infrared saunas. To live on the planet Earth today, we're living in a giant cesspool. If you're not taking a sauna on an ongoing basis, you're going to have more toxins than the body can bear. Listed below are the 5 major epigenetic factors in creating superior health or disastrous. So number 1 is affirmative thoughts. The most important thing, I work with 265,000 people in my life. The most important thing in maintaining health, youth, and reversing disease is affirmative thought. Nothing comes close to that. You would think a nutritional scientist would be telling you it's food first. It's not food first. It's head first. Head first. And if you're going to eat good food, you don't change your head, you're not going to do it. I'm going to tell you right now. You're going to find a way, as I used to. Well, it's difficult, it's hard. What am I going to do when my family gives me that? I'm going on a date, all this bullshit we say. Fuck it. You basically say, I'm going to do it. But you have to be what? Affirmative. People aren't affirmative anymore. They're wishy-washy. Everyone, let's be nice, let's negotiate. Parents want to negotiate with their children. They're my friends, I can't tell them what to do. Kids are all fucked up because of that now. Society's all screwed up. We liberals are part of that problem. There was nothing wrong. My father never beat me, but shit, I never did what he told me not to do. Because I knew I'd be in big trouble at that point. I knew what my parameters were. And it made me a better person. Do you follow that? You don't have to beat somebody, you just have to say no. And here's why no on this one. And you've got to do it to who? Yourself. Mommy and daddy are long gone. Long gone. You've got to take control now. And a lot of you had friends rather than parents. No wonder you're screwed up. Number 2. Constructive diet. People say, oh, I'm a vegan, I eat this. It's constructive diet or destructive diet, period. If you're not eating food that's not loaded with pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, genetic modification, that's plant-based, you're eating constructive food. That's where vitamins come from. Now, by the way, say, well, I get my vitamins from eating a cow. No, you don't. Vitamins all come from leaves. They come from plants. Minerals come from plants. Proteins come from plants. How many of you know what's going to happen this year? How many of you know that vegans, we went up 975% last year? Overnight. This year we're poised to go up 2,000%, and next year 4,000%. And this year, why it's going to go up 2,000 is one of your California compadres here is putting out a documentary that's going to kick everyone's ass. Because he's going to break the mold. Now, when I was a boy growing up, I was told my manhood was determined upon how much meat I consumed. And boy, you know, John Wayne ate a lot of meat. Clint Eastwood ate a lot of meat. You know, we spit, we curse, we eat meat. So, when I chose to become a vegan, I started to, you know, I'm like a flaming heterosexual. I've never once thought about a boy. But I'm going to tell you something. I started to question. Something's going wrong. It's so ingrained in your head. They get it so deeply into your head. So James Cameron, didn't you cry during Titanic? Couldn't watch it the third time, cried too much. If you're young, Avatar, this guy's a genius. He's a vegan. Down in Malibu, he has a school, all the kids eat vegan diet. So about 3 years ago, he went to a guy, he used to be your governor here, called Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold said, oh, I got a bad back, and we got this. So he said, well, why don't you become a vegan? Vegan? I'm a bodybuilder. How did you have this guy? What was he, 8 years a governor, and you didn't destroy the state? Compared to who we have in Washington, he's a genius, by the way. Genius. So anyway, he becomes a vegan. So he and Cameron got together and say, we've got to break this mold, because, by the way, he was probably the biggest meat advocate in the world at one point. That's why he had what? Heart, valve problems, kidney problems. By the way, between you and I, he was having kidney problems. That's what he was yelling about with Cameron. So they're putting a movie out called The Game Changer, this year. It's a documentary. And what they went is to the biggest macho athletes in America. I'm not big into sports, so I don't know who they are, but well, everyone would probably, oh, that's Joe Schnahuka from the Pomunchki tribe or something. So he gets to all these people, and he does the most sophisticated medical science available today. He says, do you think meat's good? And probably they'd say, oh yeah, I think meat's great. I'm eating 5-pound steaks every day. And so he monitors the medical. Then he puts them on plant-based diet. 100% of it, they improve their endurance, less stress, less injuries, etc. 100% of the time. But the biggest, and I just got this tip when I was in Europe 2 weeks ago. They said, what's really going to sell this movie, they actually show the penile size of men is larger when you're a vegan. I said, that's great. That's fucking great. People will walk out after a 2-hour movie. The one thing they'll remember, all the men will immediately go home and clean out all the meat and the cheese. That will be the end of that. I said, that was a genius. Only a Hollywood producer would be smart enough to do it. So you better eat a constructive diet. You're going to have a small wiener. Now the next one, this is for you ladies here. What's it? Aha! Look at that. Productive movement. When it was called exercise, I didn't like it. These are a play on words, right? Exercise. Who wants that? Productive movement. Now, you ladies, if you're not exercising, this is what you're missing. Get in the back of the room. Even if you do half the exercise they do. But we just talked about it. The number one way to detoxify is that. Everyone says, what can I buy? What product can I get? Well, there's products that are going to help you, but fact of the matter is, exercise is the number one way to detoxify. Now we get to some other things here. Number 4, pristine environment. Rather than say, don't be in a filthy, dirty environment, I say create a pristine environment. Now, when you go home, how many of you sleep in an organic bed? Raise your hand. One person. What, were the rest of you nuts? 2 people. Oh, you let him sleep with you? My wife said it's too expensive. I have to sleep on the floor. But you're out of your mind if you don't. You know, some of you probably came here in a BMW tonight or a Prius or something, but you'd never think about an organic. Don't you spend 8 hours a day, 1/3 of your life in bed? So what do you want? You want outgassing of chemicals when you're breathing night? You're more relaxed, you're breathing deeply. Your body is more receptive to chemicals at night than ever. And if you're not sleeping on a 100% organic bed, you're nuts. You say, oh my God, Brian is... Yeah. So you say, oh, I'm against toxins. I'm a liberal. I'm an environmentalist. Are you? Are you an environmentalist? What is one of the most toxic things that we throw into land dumps? Mattresses. Mattresses. Think about this. So anyway, I've been for 30 years sleeping on an organic mattress. Finally, I realized even the ones I was sleeping on were half bullshit. They were using wrong threads, they were using this, they were using other things. So I finally found one, Essentia, and we almost went out of business a year ago. Because once I found it, I couldn't put the guest on the other bed. And my wife said, what are you, crazy? We're going to go out of business. So I bought $750,000 worth of organic beds for Hippocrates. They don't outgas. They have essential oil in it so that the dust mites can't live. How many of you realize that within 5 years, this is a fact by the way, within 5 years, the dust mites that die, their corpses, make your bed double the weight? I don't even know, what does a bed weigh? Double the weight. So, and look, but when I was a kid, I never changed my mattress every 5 years. I was sleeping in a mattress for 20 years. Can you imagine? You don't even think about these things. And then, what are you wearing at night? We were shocked when we wrote the book Killer Clothes that 20% of women wear their bras to bed at night. What? They're afraid their husband's going to get up and look, they don't have perky breasts or something? I mean, that's outrageous. What the hell are you going to wear bras to bed at night? Now, I won't make any of you raise your hand. But that's insane. Insane. How many of you understand that 2 landmark studies show that women who wear polyester nylon bras with moderate size to small breast have 6 times more breast cancer? Want me to repeat this? 6. 6 times, not 6%. But God forbid you have big bust, because then they put underwire, then you have 8 to 9 times more. Just to make men happy. I like looking at perky breasts, but I'd rather have a woman rather than a breast cancer in a woman. Jesus, Mary. The 2 things men, really evil men, created are bras and high heels. Who invented that shit? Yeah, it was. They mustn't have liked their mother. Yeah, corsets. Thank God they got rid of those. And emo spirit. So anyway, I came back from a 3.5-week lecture tour about 3 years ago, and I was landing in West Palm Beach, and I had this revelation that we're all completely wrong, that the emotions and the spirit are one thing. I finally concluded this. All the emotions are is a representation of your spiritual depth or lack. That's all it is. So when I'm sitting here talking and expressing myself, which I always have fun doing, is I'm having a conversation with myself, basically it's a spiritual representation of who I am, what I'm thinking, my depth, etc. Now, again, we don't like that because we like to categorically put everything in nice little pack. Oh, I'm going to ohm. It's an emotional process. By the way, if ohming helps you, it's because it's emotionally stabilizing you. Prayer. You may say, oh, that prayer is good, this prayer. All prayer is the same. It gets you to do the F word, focus. That's it. That's all prayer is. Well, I was always bad. You know, my parents put me into a Catholic school. That was the worst place to put me, I can tell you. And I'd always get in trouble. So I was doing those Stations of the Cross. How many of you are Catholic here? You know what they are? For the non-Catholics, this stuff is really mentally sick. They have pictures of God bleeding. And you have to go around the church and pray to God bleeding at different stations. Then the rosaries. You get really bad, they give you these little beads that you have to do rosary on, to be forgiven for the sins. And I said, can you imagine this? This is what we call spirituality. I was speaking to the Hasidic Jews about a month ago. I went to Muncie. How many of you know where Muncie, New York is? Whole place loaded with them, praying, oh, this and that and this. So I asked, any of you know anything about God? Oh, yeah, I study God 24 hours a day. I said, no. I said, you didn't hear the question. Do any of you know anything about God? Well, I studied. I said, don't tell me what you study. I said, do you know anything about God? Not one person. 100 people in the room. Not one person could raise their hand. I said, I know anything about God. They were afraid to say. All they could do was regurgitate what they were reading out of a prayer. Do you follow that? So we are a bunch of fakers. That's all. Even in Santa Cruz, we're fakers. You know, different levels of cults. Is it an established cult or an unestablished cult? That's it. You know, the rituals we have surrounding this stuff is like insane. So everyone's spending their time in ritual. Nobody's spending their time with God, which, by the way, is inside of them. Nobody's spending that time. And no wonder we're all fouled up. No wonder we're wishy-washy. No wonder we're making friends of our children. No wonder every time the latest book comes out, you go with the next trend, you know. Because you're not there. You're not having a conversation with God. And God's always there listening, not judging. You're the judge. God's always saying everything's perfectly fine. I'm ready. When are you ready? And you're saying, I've got to study more. I've got to read more. I've got to pray more. I've got to own more. I've got to stand on my head more. God says, fuck you. Come over here. Let's talk. Don't want to talk. You may tell me something I don't want to hear. Isn't that true? How many times has your heart said something you say, oh no, I can't do that. Too hard to do that. You know it's hard? Not to do the right thing. I see that every day. People, when they're close to death, they all tell me the same exact thing. I wish my priorities were different. Don't wait till you're dead to say you wish your priorities were different. Change your priorities. Your priority is one thing, by the way. It starts with a Y, it has an O in it, it has a U in it. That's it. The only priority you should have is you. You say, oh, that's self-centered. No. It's self-respecting. There's a difference between selfish and self-love. Selfish is insane. Adolf Hitler is selfish. Self-love, Mahatma Gandhi. You get the difference? I was so happy to hear this young man who's running for your government here. Coretta King and I were very, very close friends. I marched with Martin twice, and Coretta was my mission mentor. I didn't know I was looking for a mission mentor, but God brought her into my life. And you know, we had 3-4 hour conversations. And I asked her one time, Coretta, why is it that you were willing to do what you did in spite of the fact your life was threatened? And she said, well, I never felt my life was threatened. I did what I was impassioned to do from the deep voice within me. If you're not listening to that deep voice, it's always there, always telling you the truth, always guiding you correctly, you're in trouble. And it doesn't take a lot of ritual rhetoric, standing on your head and doing yoga 5 hours a day. It takes letting go of the bullshit, that's all. Spirituality is omnipresent. You don't have to work for it. You were born with it. You have to get rid of the ritual so that you can live it. Do you follow that? Nothing wrong with practice. You need to focus. You need to pray. You need to do that. But don't get into that. That's a vehicle to get you to the place you need to be, which is what? YOU. It's to quiet the noise. If you quiet the noise, you've got to listen to the voice, not just quiet the noise. And that's the problem people have. So these are the things in epigenetics that create health or sickness. You lack them, you're going to be sick. You have them, you're going to be good. As a force connected to all other forces, we reserve and project constant change. So the other thing we hate is change. The name of our program for years was the Life Change Program. People hated it. So I said, fuck that. We're going to call it Transform now. So now it's called the Life Trans... Nobody knows what it means, so they're okay with it. It sounds a little new age. Oh, I'm going to transform. What does that mean? We don't know, but it feels good. You know, it feels good. Change is hard. And the only inevitable thing is not death and taxes, it's change. Remember that. The only inevitable thing is that. So tonight we've gone through how to detox the body, all the problems that you have. And the most important is affirmative, because if you don't let the river flow by relaxing the mind and taking away judgment and allowing the heart to dictate who you are and your future and the flow like a river, you're always going to be toxic at some level. And the toxins that I see kill people quicker than anything else are not the heavy metals and chemicals. It's emotional debris, the number one. Every single day, I talk to people that slip and say to me that some really tender part of their life has been unhappy, and maybe it's not so bad that they're sick. Do you follow? So those of us that are feeling we're sane enough not to jump off a bridge, we often use disease to kill ourselves, to be more respectable suicide agents in this case. So that's all I have to say. We'll open for some questions. If you want to dance, we can do that too, and all of that. Yes?
Brian, in your beginning, you were talking about mercury being the most toxic heavy metal. And I was taught by Art First in toxicology that it was cadmium because it's not easily or almost impossible to remove from us. Our toxic load is basically a lifetime load. So I was curious.
If you look back at the list, cadmium affects the eyes more than any other thing. I would render to say conservatively that half the eye problems we have is cadmium toxemia, as many of the rashes people have are what? Remember what I said?
Cadmium based? Oh, you said
Nickel.
nickel.
Nickel base.
Okay.
But we're both wrong, because the most damaging of all heavy metals are uranium.
Okay. That makes sense.
That's the one that's going to kill you.
Yeah.
Mercury expresses itself in more damaging ways than cadmium does. So you may have heart attacks with mercury. You may have, not may, but most often would get cancer with this. You won't get it so much with cadmium. What it is, it's a metal that is neutered, and it actually throws the electrical frequency, the circuitry off in the body, cadmium. And it's damaging and bad. There's not a good one. There's not a good one out there. And when you combine them, that's even worse. Yes? Yes?
I've heard the controversy about, what's the water you said?
Distilled, yeah. How this spring...
Is that,
Yeah.
is that you don't get trace minerals then because you take the trace minerals out and then you begin to have trace mineral deficiencies?
Well, let me give you some science that the salesman...
Repeat the question.
Okay, so what she's saying is what has been on the street as propaganda for as long as I know, that you don't get minerals from distilled water, so you're going to lack minerals. There's two kinds of minerals. The type that plants have, called organic minerals, which are really magic, by the way. If you look at the root system, and I think on the internet you probably will find it now. You see the root system in good organic soil, the little follicles on it, and there are thousands, millions of follicles. They move back and forth creating friction and take the blueprint code of the rock-solid mineral and actually ionically put it into the plant. That's what your body is built to eat. Non-structured minerals, organic minerals. Minerals that are in water are little pieces of sand. That's why you may notice where there's hard water around the world, the amount of cardiovascular arrest and strokes are dynamically and dramatically higher. So understand that you cannot digest minerals out of mineral water, spring water, well water. That's not minerals of your body. And you end up with hardening of the arteries. Stones in the kidney, stones in the bladder. So this is, again, sadly, the public is victim to lack of knowledge on this. And sadly, science is victim to lack. I would say this at a medical conference, and I'll probably have people debate me on it. When this is science. This is not a debatable thing. It's like math. Yes?
Well, except so much of what you said, what I heard was that the beach
Yeah.
mineral has
So I was really lucky 50 years ago when I began all of this, that the... So 50 years ago when I began all of this, the popular water systems then were distillers. there was an ionized waters and reverse osmosis. Maybe there were reverse osmosis. I didn't know about them though. And I was buying water for 2.5 years, and my friend said to me, buy a distiller. I said, I can't afford a distiller. And she sat me down and showed me I could have bought more than 2 distillers in 2 years, schlocking water all over the place. So the reality is they're not expensive, and I've been drinking, because I bought one 45 years ago. I've been drinking 3/4 of a gallon to a gallon of distilled water every day. And UCLA did a bone density test on me, not for that reason, and they said I was like their 18-year-old, 20-year-old football players as far as bone density. So it's mythology to think hydrogen and oxygen, 2 elements, can knock on the cell wall and seduce the minerals to come out. It's bullshit. It's complete bullshit. So you need minerals from food, not from water. That's the first factual statement. The second thing is water doesn't take minerals away because they're in the cell. Minerals don't just float around. They have to go into the cell and create cell structure. Minerals are the stepping stone for the electromagnetic currents. You'd call it meridians in Asian medicine in the body. You need minerals to have that happen. Matter of fact, if you don't have enough minerals, your heart stops. And which is the mineral that's most important? Magnesium. You get it. Magnesium. It's really simple stuff, but nobody studies this stuff. Yes?
What was your comment about the Pacific Northwest?
It is unbelievable. And actually, Vancouver Island, let me go back. I have a colleague, Nomi Crystal, who's actually America's leading authority on the fiasco that happened in Japan. And you don't want to hear this, but this is the truth. When she went to school, a friend of hers became a physicist, a doctor of physics. He was the American we sent there. He said this was human error after human error after human error. He said it was nothing like was reported on the thing. He said the valve was supposed to go to the right, they made it go to the left. They were supposed to shut one down, they shut the wrong one down. He said it was like a Marx Brothers show. So she's been monitoring. Now, wait till you hear this. Who was most dumped on in the world immediately after the accident?
The what?
Yeah, which location, geographic location? It's called, wasn't Hawaii, wasn't the West Coast. It was Florida. So what was most dumped on, the winds, the trade winds went, the jet streams went, and it stopped over Melbourne, Florida, Cocoa Beach, Melbourne, Florida, and most of the radioactivity dumped there. Now, it stopped moving in that direction, then it came. So when we go from, you're in the tip of it here, Northern California, you're on the outer parameter of it. And when you go further to Vancouver Island, that's where the majority of it went. So when you saw actually pictures, they did show homes and cars and all of this that were floating. That's where the bulk of that moved to. So the currents brought that there. So in Seattle, as an example, some alternative doctors that I'm good friends with have been having parents come in now chronically over the last couple of years with children with blotches. And they don't have the heart to tell them. I said, don't tell them. Just tell them what to do, but don't tell the parents they have radiation poisoning. And just say, it's not good for them to be in the sun, don't go to the beach. So that's what the doctors are commonly saying, rather than saying your child is, you have to move out of Seattle because your child's being irradiated with this stuff. That's how bad it is. And so the further north you go, the worse it is. Alaska's on the outer parameter of that too. But it's in the air, it's in your soil. So the so-called organic food here, we have uranium on the organic food too. If you saw the Stanford study, which I completely agreed with 4 or 5 years ago, where they tested commercial organic food versus commercial food, and it wasn't any more nutrition in it. Because the same shitty soil. Now, I always buy organic food. I'll never not buy organic food, because at least you don't get the GMO and the other things. But the fact is, and you have hippies here, and I know some of them that moved out here 40, 50 years ago. That's who you go to buy the food. Plus you have a 12-month growing season here. Most of the United States, you don't have that. So we're victim to buying things from California from big-ass commercial organic thing. And I didn't realize the shipping, how long it took. I thought this was wrong. No, I thought I was right and I was wrong. I was down in Southern California in Orange County speaking about 10 years ago, and there was a big truck driver there His whole family is on the Hippocrates diet. He healed himself of some kind of a, I forget what it was, nothing major. And I said, do you realize that you may get food on the East Coast from California that's 2 weeks old? He stood up and said, I don't want to correct you in front of the group, but it's 5 to 6 weeks old. And so I challenged him, and he won. And I said, well, how is that possible? How do you put it in the... He said, we pack the trailers with nitrogen. It's suspended animation. So he said, what we do is they pick. If you're lucky, you were part of the last pick that you got, but it's generally 5 to 6 weeks old. What do you have in the food that's 5 or 6 weeks old? This is why our founder was wise enough to focus on sprouts. 12 months a year, anywhere in the world, even if you're the poorest individual that ever lived, you can buy seeds and you can grow sprouts, which, by the way, have turned out to be the most important medicine ever discovered in history, the phytochemicals in there. So vegetables are great. Compared to a sprout, they're nothing. Compared to sprout, nothing. As an example, broccoli sprouts, or broccoli has an incredible anti-cancer agent called sulforaphane. The broccoli sprout from the same plant, 50 times stronger. So this is how, so even if you're not eating sprouts, be smart enough to start putting some sprouts into your diet. And I hope all of you are smart enough to eat plant-based diets. And if not, I spoke down in Brentwood. And everyone came with their Priuses. There were all the actors and actresses and producers. The whole room was filled, 150 people there. And I railed into them. I said, all of you are environmentalists. Oh yeah, we're environmentalists. I said, how many of you ate free-range chicken tonight? Oh yeah. I said, oh, you're an environmentalist, huh? You ever see this Cowspiracy movie? Yeah. That kick-ass kid from California, I love him. One of the best films I ever saw. Yeah. You're bullshitting if you're eating animals and telling me you're an environmentalist. You're bullshitting yourself and everyone else. And we have a guy that comes to us once a year, at least once a year. He's a man who organizes the United Nations environmental programs yearly. He said, behind closed doors for 10 years, the main subject is food. We don't let the media come in intentionally because they'd shut us down, they say. So they know. I was in England about 2 years ago. Front page of their largest magazine, or paper, basically said, Brits must become plant-based or the end of Britain is imminent. So it's clear. Yes?
I watched a movie last night called Eating You Alive. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
It was amazing.
Eating You Alive.
Eating You Alive. My daughter last night said, I am a vegan after she watched it.
God bless. I've got to see it then.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Eating You Alive.
Eating You Alive, yeah. And also another question, what do you know about alkaline water?
Alkaline water is mostly mythology. Now, here's what the fact is about it. There was a wonderful naturalist called Schellenberg in Austria, and he was never respected because he wasn't an academic. But back in 150 years ago, he was observing something with all water all around Europe and the world, that all water goes into vortexes. So if you look at a waterfall or you look at a stream or a brook, circles and comes down to small things. He hypothesized correctly, but nobody listened to him, that what it was doing is structuring and organizing the water. So put that there. 150, more than 100, 160 years ago, he's doing this. So now this big fad came out, alkalized water. Now, what we know from my colleague and friend who's now passed, University of California, Los Angeles, Dr. Hunt, is healthy cells work at 75 hertz. So if I look at, probably mine are 70, 65, 70 at this age of my life, but you look at a healthy young kid eating this way, positive attitude, exercise, 75 hertz. Now, when you look at cancer, 100% of all forms of cancer are at 10 hertz or less. So it's like a dimmer light, you're fading the cells. As the cells fade, they mutate. So cells glob together to get 100% of energy, so 10 cells come together because they don't have adequate amount of energy in themselves. And that's where you get mutation from. So sometime I'll come and I'll do a whole biofrequency lecture for you, and that's interesting. That's really medicine now. That's my true interest at this point. So what happens if you have cancer? Is alkalized water good? Sure, because what you're doing is structuring the water. Now, water is not hydrogen and oxygen. The other thing, if you don't know the science, it's actually hydrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, hydrogen, oxygen. And it keeps going in a chain. But if you have even a distilled water, you have a lot of oxygen here, a lot of hydrogen here, they're not organized and structured. So structured water does that. It organizes, as you see in nature, this. Now, you can buy a Kangen machine and be robbed like it's going out of style. They charge you $5,000. You can buy an equal machine for about $700, but guess what? I can do it for free for you by getting a bottle. You get a gallon bottle, it does exactly what a Kangen system does. So get a bottle and get salsa music, put it on, and spin it for about 5 to 8 seconds. I'm not joking. Does the same exact thing in alkaline, $5,000 alkaline system. Yeah, because all it's doing is, what's this doing? Now, is this good? Yeah, it's really good if I have cancer. If I have multiple sclerosis, 25, 30 hertz, you have fader, it's going down. What if I'm healthy? What if I have 70 hertz, which I do? And by the way, now I'm putting extra electric into my cell because this makes my cell hydrate more. So I have more energy go into my cell. It's like me coming in here with this beautifully renovated room now and saying, I know the light works, but let's put more electric into the wire. What happens to the lights? Not good. Sick people, I'm a fan for alkalized water. If you have a Kangen, you better distill it and then put a pump in. Because they don't even put a filter in there. It's a shit filter. Brita filter is what they have in there. It's something about equal to Brita. So everything go through. Even fluoride and chlorine come through these filters. We've tested them. Yeah. So no less the pharmaceuticals, 100% of those come through. So, great concept. Big fan of it if you're sick. We use them at Hippocrates for ill people, not healthy people. Now, if you're healthy and you drink 2 cups a week, I'm not talking about that. But that becomes your main staple. But you've got to purify the water ahead of time. And the cheaper, by far, if you're into this now, you can use them in Santa Cruz. You can't use them 10 miles in here, though. You're humid enough here. They have air extraction distillers that alkalize water. They cost about $900, $1,000, something like that. And by the way, your heating bill and air conditioning bill goes down too, because it's pulling humidity out of the air. Yeah.
So where do you get water
You
then?
mentioned reverse.
Healthy water.
Okay. Distillers. So a distiller, if you're a couple, so you're going to end up spending, if you want a really good one, you're going to end up spending a little less than $2,000. If you're single, it's robbery. You get $300-400, you can buy one. That's just as good, by the way. Just when you have 2 people or a family like you have, you don't want to be making water as part of your lifestyle. So you just have to get a bigger unit. The one I have has never broken, by the way. 45 years, the damn thing doesn't break. You just have to clean it. Okay, keep going. Yes?
You mentioned reverse osmosis.
Yes.
I didn't understand it.
So years ago,
It's an appropriate way to drink water.
if you read my books 20, 25 years ago, I would say if you bought an incredibly expensive, back then they were $5,000, now $7,000 RO, that was working. Then all at once we all started to recognize that plastics and pharmaceutical drugs were in every drop of water all over the world. And how does that happen? Well, where is the largest land dump in the world, larger than your state? The ocean. So larger than the state of California is a giant land dump of plastic floating there that evaporates, goes up into the clouds with the ocean water, and is evenly distributed globally from the North Pole to the South Pole. And it's subatomic, so it's protomic, so small that it goes through everything. Pharmaceutical drugs. I wrote about this 10 years ago in our magazine. And did you all sign up for the magazine? Were you getting the magazine? Did that thing go around? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it didn't go around. If you're getting it, you don't have to sign. If you're not, sign. So on the west coast of Florida, between Sarasota and Tampa, there was an outrageous, like hundreds of dolphin, shark, and whales were beaching themselves. So we were all angry at the Navy because the first report said, well, it's sonar from the submarines and the poor things are disoriented. When they did autopsies on these creatures, it was Prozac. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a nutshell. Before the pharmaceutical industry, all medicines were plants, biology. There was nothing but biology that break down. To get patents on the plants, they had to manipulate plants. That's the only reason the pharmaceutical companies exist, by the way, so they could control and patent them. Once they did that, they take away the biological chain of decomposition. So the average pharmaceutical drug today will last 25 to 50,000 years. And when you pee in your pristine home and you flush the toilet, it ends up in the aquifer. It doesn't evaporate and disappear and go to another planet. It ends up in the aquifer. And it all seeps down eventually into the ocean. So the oceans of the world are saturated with plastics now and pharmaceutical drugs. And it's not one pharmaceutical drug. Remember, it's combinations of pharmaceutical drugs that create chemicals we don't even know what they are. And so my wife and I have been noticing this since we've learned this a few years ago, that certain symptomologies we now know are overloads of drugs or chemicals that nobody can identify, including us. We just know it's, and how we know it was that, because when we clean them up and we detoxify them, they don't have the symptoms anymore. Okay, yes?
Going back to Mercury, here a dentist, I have to beg a dentist to put a dental dam in my mouth, and then he just throws it out. So I'm thinking that the exposure to mercury is even worse than that happens.
Much higher.
When we went to Mexico, the dentist down there, a biological dentist, he puts on a respirator, he puts on a face mask, gives me a nasal cannula, and then he has a big vacuum sucking.
You got it, brother. You got it. If the dentist is not doing that, it's horrible. I mean, and the rubber dam, they put a rubber dam so they can only see the tooth and the mercury doesn't go in. I mean, this is, you can get on the internet. I went to a medical college in London and I did a night on dentistry. This is a funny story. I do so many lectures, I sort of never look at what I'm supposed to speak about till I'm flying in or getting into the lecture. They said dentistry at a medical school. I didn't know that much about dentistry, other than the fact I sort of knew buzzwords about it. So I locked myself into the hotel, and I literally studied everything that I did know. I didn't go to any other area, but deeper. And I went and did an hour lecture, an hour and a half lecture. And what we were speaking about is this very thing. If you go to a dentist who claims they're alternative or holistic or whatever they call themselves, and they don't have the dams, they don't have respirators, you walk out. Don't, because I can tell you. I saw a kid when we were working at Hippocrates when we were in Boston still, that literally we sent him to the hospital. He went to a so-called holistic dentist that was just a charlatan, that literally took 7 fillings out the same day. The kid laid in bed, was shaking like this, like he had seizures. He turned white, he was dying. He was gasping for air. We had to, thank God we sent him to Mass General, they had good doctors there, and saved his life. But I saw it personally, and then working with guests over the years, nothing as dramatic as that, but I've seen it. Yes?
I have a two-part question.
Yeah.
One is, what do you think about colon therapy, and what do you think about the beamer mat?
Well, number one, we have done colon therapy from 1956 forward. So all of the guests that come to Hippocrates get colon therapy. All of the guests are also given an enema bag and told not to just do enemas and colonics, but to do wheatgrass implants, where you clean more, deeper, and also remineralize. Because what I will agree with mainstream doctors on is that you're going to take minerals out of your body when you flush it with water, period. And we just spoke about the importance of what? Minerals and the immunity. And so that's it. Beamer is incredibly good technology. There's just things better now. It used to be when I bought a $100,000 machine, I would walk around like a peacock and proud about it for 10 years. Can't do it anymore. I had Beamers, I threw them out. I put QRS in. Just like you see technology moving every 9 months, it doubles. It doubles every 9 months. It's Jobs, before he died, his wife tried to save his life. She came to us 6 weeks, and this guy would not come off fruit. He was a sugar fanatic. And God knows if he'd still be alive, but the reality is he just wouldn't give up sugar. I mean, all cancers love sugar, but I'm going to tell you, pancreatic cancer created it, I think. You know, it's just outrageous. So I got on the phone with him, and I'm about as atechnical can be. So I didn't know much what to say to him, and he's a very quiet guy to begin with. And I said, what's really impressive to me is how what's hot January 1st, by September 30th, is 100% changed. He said, in 10 years, that was what, 5 years ago? It's going to be every 2 months. So what's hot January 1st is going to be passé February 28th or 29th.
I heard it's already 2 months.
It may be. It may be already. But that's scary to a guy like me. Change, you're talking about change. So just like a Model A is a good car, but I'd rather drive a what? A Tesla. You follow it? Nothing wrong with the Model A. Nothing wrong with the Model A. And so, and I'm not saying it's that. I would say that probably a Beamer is a Prius. And I promise you, in a year from now, you hear me lecture, I'm going to come back here with new technology. What we did with this type of technology, we disassembled the machine. I have a friend that makes physicists look like they don't know what they're talking about. We now have a pulsation 24 hours a day on the entire Hippocrates campus. So like it or not, people have healing waves 24 hours a day. Guests, visitors, staff. And so that's it. We wrote about it in this magazine. You may want to read about it. You had a question?
This is back to the radiation question again, that my whole family is surfing all the time.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering about that. Like, even my kids are 10 and 11, you know, are just in the ocean constantly. So,
You need to give your kids lots of algae, both freshwater, chlorella, blue-green algae. You need to get a sauna. If you don't have a sauna, love, you need to get them in the sauna. And how old? They're 10, 11? They're still trainable. If they were 16, you wouldn't get them in it. And they'd fight you until they're 25. But that's what I'd strongly advise.
Would you say to limit the exposure?
Well, obviously, all the bad things you do, you can't have things harboring the chemical in you, or not the chemical, in this case, uranium. But the fact is, when we were brought to Chernobyl, we were brought to Moscow after Chernobyl. I wouldn't have gone to Chernobyl. What we did is use massive amounts of sea vegetables, seaweeds, and supplementation to take it out. And they showed us, we had professors and docs from the universities there, Moscow and St. Pete. In a matter of 12 days, we pulled out 28 to 29% of the uranium from that. So it's really important. You had a question?
Yes. Is there anything you build up cartilage?
Oh, yeah. Cartilage is silica. So you need to go out right here in town. The best silica product on the market, I take it every day, is called Biosil, B-I-O-S-I-L. Get the liquid, not the pill. It tastes horrible, so put it in your juice. And somebody our age, put at the beginning.
My son, 41 years old, he just found out that the ball joint, instead of being round, was like an egg, and it wore down in his hips, the cartilage.
So he needs a lot of it, but he also needs the Nikken magnets for where it's in his knee.
Hips.
They have a hip magnet. You all know about the Nikken company, don't you? Yeah. Nikken is an amazing company. I've used it. I ripped my meniscus. I actually needed surgery with the diet, silica and this. I never had surgery. Ripped it, completely ripped it. I mean, this stuff is amazing. So get on the internet. You probably have a distributor in Santa Cruz.
I used to be one.
Well, there you are. This is good. And the new technology is better than 5 years ago. So it's infrared and magnetic therapy. But he needs to start taking, he's a young guy, he metabolizes quick. He needs to start taking 15 drops 3 times a day of Biosil in water or juice. Yes?
This might be a little off topic, but I'm a musician and we play music for healing.
Yes.
And the tuning 440 as compared to 432, are you
Yeah.
familiar with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it works. I mean, when you look at when you look at biofrequency fields of the body, why certain well-known composers or musicians will always resonate with humanity. There's been deep studies on this, and it's because they're hitting at these tunes. They're hitting right at these fork levels. Now, the Beatles, and it was George Martin. The older I got to realize, the Beatles were unbelievable. I mean, just geniuses, but it was George Martin that made that sound. And he was doing those off notes, those off beats. Mozart the same. You'll never not love these people. You know, if you just like that, because they are hitting these resonation with human heart. The rhythm of the heart and the frequencies of the heart, that's what we want to be on. I like all music, even rap music now. I finally got what rap music is. Only one I hate, and I'll never like it, is heavy metal music. It just goes against the heartbeat, the resonation. Now, I know why young, angry men like that music. I get it, because I was pissed off too at that point. So they're resonating at that point because their frequencies are on. But it makes total sense, yes.
Say more about the chemtrails and your experience with that and
Yeah.
kind of things that are going on now in terms of ionizing the atmosphere.
Well, I can tell you that I would like to have believed that we were all wrong on that, but we're not. Because I just came back from a 3-week lecture tour of 8 countries in Europe, and I saw it in 6 of those countries. Not to say the other 2 didn't have it, I just happened to see it there. And there's a major scientific movement now to test it, and to test the commonality of all the the heavy metals that they're spewing around the... Now, I'm an optimist. I would like to believe that what they're doing it for is not to curb the population, although they're doing that other ways, cosmetics, I think, and vaccines. But I think that it's gotten so bad, it's gotten critical, that they're putting metallic in the atmosphere to reflect the UV light. That's what I really think the essence of this is. Now, some sinister bastard could get in there too and say, well, let's throw a few other things in there. But this is happening. It's not maybe happening. As a matter of fact, in Northern California, around Shasta, which was really pristine, it was known as pristine before, that's where they're getting a lot of evidential science here in the West Coast. Evidential. And Paris, I was in Paris one time that you could actually see them dumping it. It was one of those, the sun was going down, it was those orangey things. You could see it, the planes going over, and you could see them dumping piles of it. So there was probably a dysfunction in the planes at that point, and going to neighborhoods. Yes?
If you haven't heard of Ilana Freeland, I will send you...
Ilana Freeland.
Yeah, I'll send you a video we did. She was at Cebu a month ago, and she did a 90-minute lecture like this with the overheads. And she basically says it's part of a program, and it's going to be totally part of our future. They're creating this ionized dome over the whole planet, and it's a military program to guide the missiles, to create this metallic structure, and also to direct so that they can, activate volcanoes and create earthquakes and manipulate the weather and all that. But it's happening. It's been happening for 25, 30 years, but now it's really intensified, and it's from that level. And she was talking about, she takes a 300-power microscope, goes and looks for the aluminum fibers on the organic or whatever. You can see it. But anyway, I'll send it to you.
Oh, I'd like to see this.
When I was struggling with why are they doing this, it's part of a whole global program.
So I can't be an optimist anymore.
Yeah.
I can't, that's terrible. Yeah.
Brian,
Not the good guys.
I'm curious, I have a good friend that's on the second cycle of apparently successfully overcoming cervical cancer,
Mm-hmm.
but she's choosing hyperbaric oxygen treatment. And I was kind of puzzled because it seemed to me as though that would be the most free radical forming kind of thing that you can do. There may be reasons to do it and that I'm not aware of, but I'm just going, wait a minute,
Yeah, well, it's almost counterintuitive, and you must know something about biology. The reality, quite simple, is if you are using things like glutathione and whole food vitamin IVs and taking hyperbaric, nothing beats that to jack up the immune system. Hyperbaric within itself will not be that effective. Yeah, it's great for other things, healing, wound healing, etc., but cancer, you have to combine it. There were 2 landmark studies done about 5-7 years ago that both concluded the same thing, that nutrient absorption increased by 40% and immune function doubled with combination of hyperbaric and that. We've been using hyperbaric for over 20 years at Hippocrates. And glutathione and whole food. 99% of holistic doctors put chemical supplements into your body.
How do you deliver the glutathione bypassing the gut system?
Oh, you're IVing it.
Oh, okay.
You're IVing it. And by the way, there's a new glutathione created in California, by the way, a liposol that does. Goes right through because they put it in fat. They put it in lipids. So it really, really works.
Okay, the other question I had about the sauna was far near infrared.
You know, there's a debate on that, but it doesn't really matter because it's going to heat the cell up. One more question?
One more and that's it.
You had a question way in the back?
Concerning infrared saunas, is that different than our regular sauna?
Much different, yeah. A regular sauna is like you and I getting into an oven. So you heat it from the outside in. An infrared sauna heats your cell from the inside, like tickling your cell, and it heats up. So by doing that, it relaxes. Like start tickling you, you relax too. And that's what it does. It opens up, and that's where you get 87% more waste coming out of the cell. Now, well, how many of you have saunas already? Okay. Don't change your sauna. What I did, and I almost made a mistake. I was going to rip out my old element, and I was going to put in an infrared. Oh, you have. Well, then you don't have to do anything. But if you just have a normal sauna, just get the infrared element, stick it in your sauna. So I have both. Not when I travel, but when I'm home, it's a normal sauna heating me from the outside and the other one. I just kept them both. And I'm always in a rush, so it heats me up quicker. Thanks so much for having me tonight. Thanks for listening. I'll sign some books and answer dirty questions later.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you so much, Brian. Let's give him another huge round of applause.